There is a difference between failing and sabotaging yourself. Failure is an event. Sabotage is a pattern. And most people never learn to tell the difference. They think life is punishing them, when in truth, they are punishing themselves. They believe destiny is cruel, when it's their own unconscious mind that keeps pulling the strings behind the curtain. You are not failing, you are fighting yourself. You are waging a silent war between the person you are and the person you could become. And the tragedy of it is that you don't even know you're doing it. You call it procrastination, laziness, fear, distraction, but it's none of those things. It's self-preservation. Your mind is protecting the identity that has outlived its usefulness. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That is the essence of sabotage. You are not cursed. You are simply controlled by the part of yourself you refuse to look at. Every time you start to rise, that old identity panics, because evolution means death to the ego that built its comfort around limitation. The moment you begin to change, the subconscious whispers, "Who do you think you are?" And without even realizing it, you obey that voice. You slow down. You rationalize your hesitation. You convince yourself that you're not ready, not worthy, not capable. And the pattern repeats again and again until your potential suffocates beneath your own excuses. You call it bad luck. The universe calls it avoidance. You are not failing, you are hiding. You are hiding behind distractions that feel productive, behind relationships that drain you but make you feel wanted, behind habits that numb your anxiety while feeding your decay. You are hiding behind everything except the one thing that could free you: accountability. Accountability is the mirror the ego fears most. Because the moment you hold yourself accountable, the illusion dies. The illusion that someone else is responsible. The illusion that time will fix it. The illusion that you can become more without first confronting the part of you that resists growth. The truth is, your life is not falling apart. It is falling into alignment with your level of self-awareness. Every mistake, every loss, every dead end, all of it is feedback. Life is not punishing you. It is reflecting you. Look closely. You will see the pattern. You start something with passion. You feel alive. Then, just when you're close to breaking through, you stop. You withdraw. You overthink. You sabotage the momentum with perfectionism or doubt or distraction. You tell yourself it's bad timing, that you're waiting for the right moment, that you need to feel ready. But readiness is an illusion. It is the lie your comfort zone tells you to keep you small. Because if you waited until you felt ready, you would never move. The mind craves familiarity, even if it's killing you. It would rather repeat misery than risk transformation. That is the paradox of the human psyche. It fears change more than failure. And that's why most people live their entire lives orbiting the same emotional planet, different years, same pain, different faces, same patterns, different dreams, same self-sabotage. You keep thinking you're starting over, but you're not. You're looping. Because your subconscious keeps dragging you back to the version of you that it recognizes. To break the loop, you must confront the part of you that benefits from your chaos. Yes, benefits. Because every form of self-sabotage hides a reward. The procrastinator gains relief from pressure. The perfectionist gains control. The people pleaser gains validation. The victim gains attention. The angry gain power. Every toxic pattern survives because it serves something. Ask yourself, what do I gain from my own suffering? What is the payoff of staying stuck? Until you answer that, you will never change. Because the mind will never release what it believes is protecting you. That's the cruel irony. Your self-sabotage is an act of protection, a misguided guardian of your ego. It's the voice that whispers, "Stay here, it's safe," but safe is a slow death. The greatest danger to your potential is not failure, it's comfort. Comfort is the invisible coffin. It buries millions long before the body dies. It kills your urgency. It dulls your hunger. It sedates your soul. And the tragedy? You think it's peace. No, it's decay disguised as peace. True peace comes only after transformation. But transformation requires conflict, the tearing apart of your old identity. That is why so few ever reach it. They flee the conflict, not realizing that the discomfort they avoid is the very gate to their awakening. If you wish to stop sabotaging yourself, you must learn to suffer consciously. You must allow the discomfort to teach you, because pain is not your enemy. Pain is the language of evolution. Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos is not the problem, it's your refusal to face it. You bury it in work, in screens, in noise, in other people. You drown your calling with constant distraction. And then you wonder why your soul aches even when life looks good on paper. Because the soul doesn't care about appearances, it cares about alignment. You can fake success, you can fake happiness, you can fake confidence, but you cannot fake alignment. When you are misaligned, you will feel it, a subtle fatigue that no rest can fix, a restlessness that no achievement can silence. That's your higher self pulling at the leash of your habits, begging you to stop betraying your potential. But here's the truth. The mind cannot create beyond what it believes it deserves. You keep sabotaging your opportunities because deep down, you still believe you are not worthy of them. You still identify with your past failures. You still wear your old wounds like proof that you are incapable. You are not sabotaging your life, you are protecting your identity. And until you are willing to let that old identity die, nothing new can live. You will continue to find new ways to recreate old pain, new jobs that repeat the same frustration, new lovers who mirror the same wounds, new goals that end the same way until you finally face the one common denominator, to you. But this is not condemnation, it's liberation. Because the moment you realize that you are the cause, you also realize that you are the cure. You are not failing. You are resisting your next evolution. The universe keeps giving you lessons in different disguises, hoping you'll recognize the pattern. It will repeat the pain until it becomes conscious. It will make you uncomfortable until you awaken. It will take from you everything that was built on self-betrayal, not to punish you, but to prepare you. Every collapse you've endured was not destruction, it was demolition. Life clearing out the old architecture of your fear so you can build on truth. You have not been failing, you have been training. Every setback was sharpening your awareness. Every disappointment was refining your focus. Every heartbreak was teaching you detachment. But awareness without action is just another form of self-sabotage. You can know everything and still change nothing, because knowledge only becomes transformation when it collides with discipline. Discipline is self-respect in motion. It's what separates dreamers from creators. It's what turns potential into power. Stop waiting for motivation. Motivation is emotional weather. It changes daily. Discipline is the climate it stays. The reason you can't stay consistent isn't because you lack motivation. It's because you've tied your actions to emotion instead of identity. You act like a motivated person when you feel inspired. But the moment discomfort arrives, you revert to the identity of the unworthy. Change your identity, and your behavior will follow. You must decide who you are, not based on what you've done, but on what you're becoming. The mind follows identity like a compass follows north. Once you decide who you are, your actions begin to align automatically. If you tell yourself you're disciplined, you'll find evidence to prove it. If you tell yourself you're lazy, you'll find excuses to justify it. The subconscious always seeks coherence. It would rather be consistently limited than inconsistently limitless. So rewrite the script. Stop saying I'm trying. Say I'm becoming. Stop saying I'll do better. Say I am better. Language shapes consciousness. Words are not communication, they are creation. Every time you say I can't, your mind hears I won't. Every time you say I'll try, your mind hears, I doubt. Speak differently, move differently, think differently, even when you don't feel it, especially when you don't feel it, because emotion follows motion. And when you start moving differently, the self that sabotages you begins to dissolve. It loses its grip. Because sabotage thrives on inaction, on indecision, on overthinking. It starves when you move with clarity. Clarity does not come from thinking, it comes from action. You cannot think your way into confidence. You must act your way into it. You cannot wait for belief. Belief is built through behavior. Every small act of discipline is a declaration. I am no longer who I was. That is how transformation begins, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. You do not need to become perfect. You need to become precise. Precision in thought, precision in energy, precision in action. Because every scattered thought is a leak in your power. Every wasted hour is a wound in your destiny. Every unguarded mind is a playground for self-sabotage. Guard your mind. It is the architect of your reality. And remember, you were never failing. You were only being refined. You were only learning how to stop fighting your own evolution. The war is over when you stop sabotaging yourself. And when that happens, when you finally align your thoughts with your truth, your actions with your purpose, and your discipline with your destiny, you will realize something extraordinary. You were never behind. You were never broken. You were only becoming. You were only waking up to who you truly are. And once you awaken, sabotage dies quietly, starved of your attention, stripped of its power, erased by your awareness. You will not need to fight it anymore, because the self that once betrayed you will no longer exist. Only the one who was always waiting beneath the ruins, calm, focused, unstoppable. You were never failing. You were only remembering. And the remembering never happens in one moment, it happens in layers, like peeling back the walls you built to protect yourself from the truth. You start to see how deep the pattern goes, how every hesitation, every excuse, every moment of delay is not random, it's architecture. Carefully constructed walls built out of fear disguised as logic. You will see it in the small things first. The way you check your phone before doing the work. The way you overthink every decision until the moment passes. The way you tell yourself, you'll start tomorrow, as if tomorrow were a guarantee. Those tiny acts of avoidance are not harmless. They are micro-sabotages. Silent betrayals that, when added together, form the story of a life unlived. Jung taught that the shadow, everything we deny, suppress, or ignore, does not disappear. It waits. It waits in the corners of your mind until it can express itself through sabotage. When you procrastinate, it's your shadow acting. When you quit something right before it succeeds, that's the shadow. When you attract the same kind of pain again and again, it's not coincidence, it's the unconscious repeating itself until you listen. And the listening is everything. Because awareness without presence is just noise. To listen to yourself, truly listen, is to face the parts you have exiled, the insecure you, the bitter you, the fearful you, the one who remembers every failure and uses it as prophecy. You cannot conquer what you won't confront. So stop running from yourself. Sit with your fears until they speak. Ask them what they are protecting. Ask them why they're still here. Most of your fears will tell you the same story. I am here to keep you safe from humiliation, rejection, pain. They are loyal guards, but guards can become jailers. They were supposed to protect you for a moment, not forever. You have outgrown them. Growth, however, terrifies the part of you that believes safety is survival. That part doesn't care about greatness. It only cares about control. It will sabotage any attempt at freedom, because freedom means risk. Freedom means uncertainty. Freedom means standing naked before possibility with no guarantee. But that's where life begins. Every great evolution starts with the death of certainty. You have to walk blind before you walk bold. You have to act before you believe. You have to leap before your mind agrees. Because the mind follows the body, it does not lead it. The reason most people never change is because they wait for permission from the very part of themselves that fears change. They wait for courage to silence fear when courage is born from acting in the presence of it. So act, even if your hands shake, even if your voice trembles, even if the old version of you screams to turn back. Act anyway, because action breaks hypnosis. And that hypnosis is deep. Modern life is designed to keep you sedated, scrolling, reacting, comparing, trapped in a cycle of stimulation that drains your will to evolve. You call it entertainment, but it's engineered inertia. Every second of distraction is a small theft of your destiny. But destiny doesn't vanish, it waits. It watches you every night when you can't sleep. It hides in the ache that follows every wasted hour. It whispers in the silence after the noise fades. You can drown it for a while, but you cannot escape it. Because destiny is not something you chase, it is something you become when you stop running from yourself. You are not failing, you are delaying your arrival. And every delay costs you something sacred: time, energy, belief. Each time you postpone your evolution, your self-trust erodes. You stop believing your own promises. You become the liar you fear in others. That is the ultimate sabotage, not betrayal by others, but betrayal by self. You must learn to rebuild trust with yourself. You must keep your own word even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching, because self-respect is born in solitude. The private victories, the invisible discipline, the choices made in silence, those are the roots of power. Discipline is not control, it's devotion. It's the daily act of choosing your future over your feelings. It's the quiet rebellion against the part of you that craves comfort more than growth. And when you choose growth long enough, something shifts. The same patterns that used to sabotage you begin to dissolve, because you've changed the vibration they depend on. The old habits cannot survive in the new frequency of awareness. You start to notice that you no longer need to fight the urge to self-destruct. It simply stops appearing. The temptations that once pulled you off course lose their gravity. You stop negotiating with the old identity because it no longer fits. You start waking up differently. You move slower but with purpose. You speak less but with precision. You no longer chase outcomes, you shape them. You begin to live like a sculptor, patient, deliberate, focused. Every decision, every action, every thought becomes a chisel shaping your reality. And for the first time, life begins to feel like a collaboration instead of a competition. You realize the universe was never against you, it was waiting for you to align. This is where sabotage dies, not through effort, but through awareness. You see the pattern, and because you see it, it can no longer control you. You understand that procrastination was fear of inadequacy, that perfectionism was fear of exposure, that laziness was fear of failure disguised as apathy, that overthinking was fear of loss disguised as intelligence. You see it all, and seeing is liberation. You begin to forgive yourself, not the shallow forgiveness of words, but the deep forgiveness that comes from understanding why you did what you did. You were not lazy, you were scared. You were not inconsistent, you were unconvinced. You were not weak, you were uninspired. Forgiveness turns shame into wisdom. It transforms self-criticism into self-compassion. And from compassion grows strength, because strength is not built from discipline alone. It's built from understanding. You can't bully yourself into greatness. You can only guide yourself into alignment. And alignment means this: your thoughts, words, and actions must point in the same direction. The moment they do, life bends toward you. The obstacles that once terrified you become teachers. The failures that once haunted you become blueprints. The very pain that once sabotaged you becomes your propulsion. You will realize that every delay had purpose. Every collapse was construction. Every wound was a window. You are not behind. You are exactly where the universe needed you to break the pattern. And when you break it, something extraordinary happens. Your mind stops fighting you. The war inside goes silent. For the first time, you wake up without the heaviness of self-doubt. You move without the friction of fear. You act without second guessing. That is the peace. No one tells you about the peace that comes not from perfection but from internal alignment. You no longer chase motivation because you've built momentum. You no longer chase confidence because you've built proof. You no longer chase validation because you've built self-trust. You become your own source. That's when life changes. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you stop making it harder. You stop sabotaging yourself. You start living in sync with your own design, aware, awake, aligned. And when that happens, failure no longer scares you, because you realize failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the process of it. You will fail again. Yes, but you won't sabotage. Because failure only destroys those who resist its lesson. You will rise from it, wiser, quieter, sharper, and in that stillness, in that deep, unshakable awareness, you'll see the truth. You were never failing. You were always being prepared. Prepared to lead, prepared to create, prepared to become the version of you that no longer fights the flow of life but moves with it. The self that once sabotaged you has become your shadow no longer. It now walks behind you, where it belongs, quiet, integrated, powerless. You are free. Free to act, free to believe, free to rise. You were never failing. You were simply awakening. And awakening is rarely gentle. It comes with the sound of your illusions shattering like glass breaking in the middle of the night. It comes with confusion, disorientation, grief, because you are not just changing your life, you are shedding identities that were never truly yours. Every version of you that was built on fear, approval, guilt, or survival begins to die. And death, even symbolic, is not peaceful. You begin to see that the self you've called me for so long was only a story, a collection of reactions to pain, to expectations, to conditioning. You were taught to be small because the world fears what cannot be controlled. You were taught to be agreeable, humble, realistic, not because these traits make you wise, but because they make you safe. Safe for others, safe for systems, safe for mediocrity. But your soul was never meant to be safe. It was meant to be sovereign. So when you start to awaken, your old self will fight for survival. It will whisper, don't change too much. Don't lose what you've built. Don't risk what's comfortable. But comfort is just fear disguised as peace. And every time you choose it over growth, you return to your cage willingly, softly, smiling at your own captivity. You call it stability. The universe calls it self-sabotage. You can't awaken and stay the same. You can't expand and remain loved by everyone who knew the smaller version of you. You can't discover truth and still worship the illusion of control. Something has to die, maybe your attachment to certainty, maybe your dependence on validation, maybe your addiction to approval. But something must burn, because every rebirth requires fire. And that fire, that sacred destruction, is where sabotage transforms into surrender. You stop fighting yourself. You stop arguing with your instincts. You stop second-guessing your intuition. You start trusting the deeper intelligence within you, the one that doesn't need logic to know, the one that feels truth like a pulse beneath your skin. That is your real mind, not the chattering one filled with doubt, but the quiet one that speaks through conviction. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. It is not about becoming perfect. It's about integrating every part of yourself that you once rejected. The anger, the envy, the fear, the desire, all of it. You bring them home, you stop fighting the darkness and learn to use it as fuel, because sabotage thrives in repression. But integration transforms it into power. You start realizing that the traits you once hated about yourself were never flaws. They were raw, unshaped energy. Anger becomes strength when directed. Fear becomes awareness when understood. Desire becomes vision when channeled. You are not meant to destroy your shadow. You are meant to master it. And mastery is not a moment. It's a lifestyle. It's the constant awareness of your inner patterns, not to judge them, but to observe them with compassion, to watch your mind try to pull you back into the old, and gently say, not this time. Every time you do that, every time you choose awareness over reaction, you rewire the code of your consciousness. You teach your nervous system that safety no longer means stagnation. You teach your subconscious that growth is not a threat, it's liberation. And slowly the inner resistance weakens. The war quiets. The sabotage stops. This is the real victory, not wealth, not recognition, not validation, but internal coherence. A mind that no longer betrays itself. A heart that no longer hides from its calling. A soul that no longer confuses peace with avoidance. That's freedom. And when you reach that level of self-honesty, life stops being a battle. It becomes a conversation between your actions and your awareness, your discipline and your destiny. You start moving differently. You no longer chase. You attract through clarity. You no longer beg for opportunities. You create through alignment. You no longer perform for love. You radiate it effortlessly. That's when the external begins to mirror the internal. The chaos in your world begins to settle because the chaos inside you has been seen, not suppressed seen. Clarity replaces confusion. Confidence replaces hesitation. Purpose replaces noise. And the same people who once doubted you will wonder what changed. They will think you got lucky, that you found a secret, that something external suddenly favored you. But what they will never understand is that the world did not suddenly open to you. You simply stopped standing in your own way. That's all sabotage ever was, resistance to your own becoming. You were the obstacle. You were the distraction. You were the delay. And once you stop resisting, everything begins to move. Because the universe is not waiting for you to prove yourself. It's waiting for you to stop doubting yourself. When that happens, momentum returns. Not forced momentum. Not the desperate chase of those who run from fear, but the calm, consistent rhythm of someone who finally knows who they are. You no longer sprint, you stride. You no longer rush, you rise. You start working not for validation, but for fulfillment. You stop asking, what if it doesn't work? And start asking, what if it does? And that single shift from fear to faith rewires everything. Your actions gain weight. Your decisions carry conviction. Your presence becomes magnetic. People feel it before you speak. Because truth, once embodied, doesn't need to announce itself. You are no longer sabotaging yourself. You are sculpting yourself. You are no longer at war with your potential. You are protecting it. Every boundary you set, every discipline you maintain, every silence you choose, they are no longer born of fear. They are acts of reverence. You are no longer acting from scarcity. You are building from abundance. And abundance is not what you have, it's what you are when you no longer leak your energy through self-betrayal. You've reclaimed yourself, the self that once delayed, the self that once doubted, the self that once feared being too much or not enough gone. What remains is someone untouchable, unhurried, unbothered. Someone who understands that life was never meant to be conquered, it was meant to be aligned with. And when you align, you realize that every moment of sabotage was simply a doorway, one that led you here, to the quiet understanding that you were never broken, never behind, never lost. You were only remembering what it feels like to trust yourself again. And in that trust lies your entire freedom. Because no external obstacle, no criticism, no failure, no loss can sabotage the one who is no longer divided within. You have become whole. And that unshakable wholeness is what the world will one day call power, but you will know the truth. It's not power, it's peace. The peace that comes from never again being your own enemy. The peace that comes from walking in rhythm with your own becoming. The peace that whispers, quietly but surely, you were never failing. You were simply awakening to the strength you've always had. And that finally is the end of sabotage, not through resistance, but through remembrance. You are free now, free to rise, free to live, free to become everything that the smaller version of you once feared. The war is over, and you have won. And when the war inside you finally ends, there is a silence, not the silence of emptiness, but of arrival. A silence so pure that it hums with life. You sit in that stillness and realize that everything you were chasing, everything you thought you needed to prove, everything you feared losing, it was all noise. You were never meant to conquer life, you were meant to awaken within it. And in that awakening, the chase dies, the striving dies, the self-criticism dies. You no longer wake up in panic because you understand. You cannot lose what is meant for you, and you cannot gain what you are not yet ready to hold. What once felt like punishment now feels like precision. Every delay, every detour, every disappointment, it all led you here, to this clarity, to this strength, to this peace. You look back at every moment you sabotaged yourself, every time you withdrew right before success, every time you dimmed your light to be liked, every time you abandoned your instincts, and instead of anger, you feel gratitude. Because those moments were not failures, they were mirrors. Mirrors showing you the exact places where you still needed to heal. The truth is, self-sabotage was never your enemy. It was your unconscious trying to protect you from a life you hadn't yet believed you deserved. It was love distorted, misdirected, afraid. And once you see it as love, the resentment fades, the shame dissolves. You begin to hold your own past with reverence instead of regret. You realize that every version of you, even the ones that stumbled, procrastinated, and hid, was trying to keep you alive long enough to get here. And now you're here, fully aware, fully awake, no longer asleep behind the wheel of your own destiny. You no longer need to fight the darkness within you, because you've learned to see in the dark. You no longer need to resist pain, because you've learned to read its language. You no longer need to prove your worth, because you finally feel it in your bones. You understand now that every act of sabotage was a test of awareness, of will, of self-compassion. And you passed, not by conquering it, but by understanding it. You've become your own ally. You've become your own parent. You've become your own protector. You no longer abandon yourself for comfort. You no longer betray yourself for belonging. You no longer quiet your truth to maintain peace, because you've learned that peace built on suppression is just another form of self-sabotage. Now your peace is real, heavy, rooted, the kind that doesn't flinch when tested. You are no longer driven by fear. You are pulled by vision, and that vision isn't loud. It's calm. It doesn't scream for attention. It radiates certainty. It doesn't rush. It moves in divine timing. That is the final transformation, when you stop being addicted to chaos and start craving clarity. When you stop measuring progress by speed and start measuring it by alignment. You finally understand that growth isn't about becoming more, it's about becoming true. You no longer chase purpose, you embody it. You no longer wait for motivation, you are it. You no longer pray for strength, you move as it. You become what you once sought. And as you walk through life with this new consciousness, sabotage can no longer find you. It cannot live in a mind that is awake. It cannot survive in a soul that has remembered its power. You will still face challenges, yes. You will still feel doubt, fear, temptation, but they will no longer own you. They will visit, but not stay. They will whisper, but not command. Because now you know the difference between your truth and your triggers. And when you know that difference, nothing can control you again. That's the moment you become untouchable, not because life gets easier, but because you stop fighting the flow of it. You move through each day with grace, precise, calm, powerful. You no longer rush to prove. You no longer fear to rest. You no longer cling to outcomes. You simply walk as someone who knows they cannot lose themselves again. You have built a life from the inside out. The foundation is not luck, it is not approval, it is not fear, it is self-trust, and self-trust is the rarest, strongest force on earth. When you trust yourself, you become immune to manipulation. You become indifferent to rejection. You become guided instead of reactive. And that is what it means to be free. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from being controlled by what you fear. That is the highest form of power. That is the essence of enlightenment. You were not failing. You were being refined. You were not lost. You were being redirected. You were not broken. You were being rebuilt. Every setback was sacred. Every delay was divine. Every mistake was mercy in disguise. And when you finally see that, truly see it, you realize you never needed to be saved. You only needed to stop standing in your own way. Because the truth is simple, and it always has been. You were never failing. You were never falling behind. You were never too late. You were simply learning the art of getting out of your own shadow. And now, as the dust settles and the silence deepens, there you are, the real you, unmasked, unafraid, unstoppable. The self-saboteur is gone. The survivor is gone. All that remains is the creator, the one who builds without fear, the one who loves without apology, the one who moves with intention and speaks with truth. You no longer sabotage yourself because you have nothing left to prove. You are no longer at war with your own potential because you have remembered what you are: infinite, whole, awake. You were never failing. You were never broken. You were simply preparing for the moment when you could finally handle the weight of your own greatness. And that moment is now. Now you rise. Now you move forward. Now you live. No more resistance. No more hiding. No more fear. Because you understand, at last, you were never failing. You were only awakening. And now that you're awake, you will never fall asleep again.